you've just delivered a very informative and very interesting talk on the remembrance of World War I, with specifically the Armenian genocide in Turkey, with the title Progressive Politics and Retrogressive Textbooks, with a question mark, we should probably add, as you've said. My question would be, to start with, how would you define this progressive element in politics?
As I was trying to say in my paper, the denialist discourse of Turkish nationalism vis-a-vis the Armenian genocide of 1915 is basically a unionist, ittihadist and Kemalist construct. That is to say, it is an ideological construct coming out of modernist Turkish nationalism. And one can understand why this is so, because the unionists perpetrated, the unionist leadership were the prime perpetrators of the horrors of 1915. And you cannot really say that the Kemalist state was directly responsible for it. But at the same time, what happened was the Kemalist state inherited that territoriality, that speciality that had been Turkified to a considerable extent. That is to say, in retrospect, you could say that the unionist Turkification of Asia Minor in 1915 succeeded in providing the then embryonic but basically future Turkish nation state with the relatively homogenized territorial space that it needed for state building. So there is this continuity element. I did not go into too many details, but this, what you could call initially deliberate forgetting, or the interruption of the processes of production and reproduction of knowledge, that prevailed from the 1920s through the 30s, 40s, 50s into the 60s. From the 60s onwards started turning into a systematic denialist discourse. I would like to stress this point. For the first 50 years of the Republic, I doubt if we can speak of a systematic denialism. But at the same time, there is no ideological vacuum either, because that space is filled by the construction of the history of the Turkish Revolution. That is to say, our pure and 100% innocent and virtuous revolution that was only and only against imperialism, only and only against the great powers. This anti-imperialist sanitization of the history of the Turkish Revolution develops from the early 1920s through Mustafa Kemal's great six-day speech of 1927 into official ideology status. On top of that, in the 60s and 70s, there comes systematic denialism, to a considerable extent triggered by the Asala assassination attempts against Turkish diplomats in the 60s and 70s. It is there that you get this emphasis entirely on context as apology. That is to say, somehow, the decline of the Ottoman Empire and the imperialist struggles over the division of the spoils, together with the complicity of various Balkan or Caucasian nationalist movements, patronized by the great powers in that entire turbulence or chaos. All this has been traditionally made by Turkish nationalism into a kind of comprehensive apology, which sometimes reads like, it happened despite the best of our intentions, but in a worst case scenario can easily read like, those Armenians got what was coming to them. That is to say, they deserved the genocide. You can have various nuances and gradations in between. Now, this was official state ideology until virtually the end of the 20th century or very early in the 21st century. Since then, there have been inroads and very significant inroads coming out of two different dynamics. On the one hand, from the late 90s onwards, but increasingly from 2000 onwards, Turkish academics, historians, and other social scientists living and working and producing inside Turkey, and not just abroad, have started speaking out and publishing and giving interviews or organizing various conferences and lectures in Turkish public space and even in the mainstream media. That is to say, not in very small selling book publications, etc. And this has had a shattering impact on the end of a reign of psychological terror, shall we say, the end of a reign of intimidation, and the emancipation of public space. Not by intent, not by conscious, deliberate planning, but as an accident of history. This has coincided with the AKP government's 10 plus years in office. And what has been the AKP dynamic in this regard? They are coming in from the periphery of Turkish politics. That is to say, they have not been part of the unionist, Kemalist mainstream establishment, and they have time and again they have felt themselves to be victimized by modernist Turkish nationalism and its ideological hegemony as Muslims, as Muslim, shall we say, conservative Muslim Democrats, whatever, the equivalent of the European Christian democracy in Turkey, something like that. And at the same time, they have been very, very pragmatic in their political approach. That is to say, they have been much less determined by an ideological straitjacket than virtually all other Turkish political parties or groupings. And over the last decade, it has apparently suited their own political perspectives to allow and facilitate this emancipation of Turkish public space with regard to the Armenian genocide. There have been several, when you look back to the year 2002, from that moment onwards, they have actually taken not one but several steps which need to be put together in some way. Already from 2003-2004 onwards, both Erdogan and Davutoğlu and others in the AKP leadership were distancing themselves from the old official discourse by saying, we don't really know about the Armenian genocide, we don't know what happened in 1915, we have to work on this, etc. And they were coming under incredibly heavy attack from the old Kemalist establishment for saying things like that, that is to say, deviating from the old line. This gradually escalated to the point where the famous demise of Ottoman Armenians during the demise of Empire Conference of fall 2005 it was possible to hold this conference, at least to some extent, because of the benevolent protection provided by then Prime Minister Erdogan, Foreign Minister Gül, and the rest of the AKP leadership and government at that time. Recently this year we have had this totally unexpected, as far as I'm concerned, phenomenon of the condolences message of 23rd April 2014. So this is all that I try to imply by progressive politics. Not to the point of outright recognition of the genocide,
but as a particular distancing and departure from what has been
increasing deviation from the old Kemalist party line.
The second part of your title is the retrogressive textbooks, which has appeared recently also. Education, yes. Which has appeared in textbooks recently, again, a sort of denialist, nationalist tone in education and textbooks. My question is that could it be interpreted as some sort of a warning signal of perhaps this progress that has been there for about a decade or so may not be linear, or it could be reversible, or is tentative in fact. Is it
All
something?
that is true. I would say all that is true always. I mean, historical development or progress, whatever you want to call it, is never linear. It is always full of zigzags.
But beyond theory, do we have signs of that?
Right. I am not sure. I mean, when I say I'm not sure at the level of real information about just what this is coming out of. There are maybe 2 or 3, perhaps overlapping or crisscrossing complementary possibilities. First of all, the deep state in Turkey, that is to say the old Kemalist establishment, has been considerably weakened, but we know that it is still there. And we know that on other occasions too, whenever the AKP, for example, over a peaceful solution to the Kurdish question, some kind of deal with the PKK, constantly there are mysterious elements within the state structure which seem to be coming out to sabotage this. Any kind of, what we might call positive democratic development. What strikes me about the new texts of these textbooks, is that in fact they are so old. That is to say, it seems like a potpourri of everything that was being written in the 1960s and 70s about how the state was actually very benevolent and Armenians were well protected, and it was all the fault of Armenian nationalist organizations, and they were being actually conducted in great safety and security to rear areas for their own sake, etc. It is, you don't see in it any trace of a new language or a new formulation. It seems like it is copy-pasted out of something very, very old. That is the first thing that is interesting. At the same time, back in until in fact the 90s, there was absolutely nothing in the Turkish national curriculum or textbooks about the Armenian question. That is because the ideological monopoly was so strong and the wall of silence was so solid, so it seemed, and people were so afraid to transgress on the existing ideological taboos that when it came to school education, the Atatürkist or late Atatürkist establishment seemed to think that the less said about it, the better. Let's not, mention it at all, kind of thing. Paradoxically, I think what has been happening parallel to the progress of emancipation of public space that I tried to describe, a more and more vehemently militant kind of crudity is being reinserted into textbooks.
By whom?
I wish I knew.
Not by the Ministry of Education.
Well, it is under the aegis of the Ministry of National Education, but I know that it is also quite possible to slip things past even ministers of national education.
Is it also possible that there's a sort of a shared state veneration among different factions of the secularist and Islamist power holders?
That is also possible. It is also possible that, all right, it might have originated as a fait accompli to the AKP government and its education minister, but then they might not have found it within themselves to scrap it, especially in the face of vociferous public demands for an apology that they owe to the Turkish public for these textbooks. You know, there is this tradition of not losing face in Turkish politics. That is to say, not admitting any mistake whatsoever.
And
I don't
as
know.
you've said, it might also be appealing to different audiences, the apology to an international audience, the textbook to a domestic audience. Let me ask one final question about the study of history in such difficult, over such difficult issues and questions. You've mentioned, of course, that context is, you can't do without context in the study of history. But at the same time, the attempts to contextualize issues like the Armenian question run the risk of perhaps rationalizing the conditions by which such monstrosities could happen. But also without context, we cannot understand them. How do we get out of this paradox?
Well, by meticulous scholarship and ethical courage. Also, this is something that we have to understand. I mean, in history, in all sociocultural processes, there is no necessary and inevitable one-and-one relationship between a particular cause and a certain effect. That is to say, if there is a certain context of demise of empire and various other hostile, imperialist or rival nationalist dynamics challenging Turks or Muslim Turks' right to existence, I cannot jump to the conclusion that the only way out of that is genocide. There is a question of ideological intermediacy that comes in between. There might be certain factors pushing you towards certain things or certain challenges presented to you, but humans are humans. Humans are, as Ernest Gellner famously put it, humans are underprogrammed animals. And it is not as if there is only one possible socio-political or ideological reflex in such situations. In fact, it is nationalist ideology that tells us, that tries to naturalize all historical processes and takes its naturalization of itself and of all historical processes to the point of saying this was necessary and inevitable because there was no other solution. What would I say if a neo-Nazi said to me, Hitler's final solution was the only possible solution. If I don't accept that, why should I accept the apology, the denialist apology, that a massive ethnic cleansing of Ottoman Armenians was the only solution for the Ottoman state?
Thank you very much, Professor Berktay, for your comments and your insights.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.